Thank you everyone joining. Yeah, let's start. This webinar is about becoming digital first, rising to the challenges of digital transformation. One second. Oops. Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the agenda today. So we're going to tell you about us and the people who commissioned this, the people that ran this, and then we're straight going to dive into the material, the foundings, and talk about the research methodology, digital strategy, the common elements, digital projects, aims, successes, and challenges, and then the impact. And then we're going to open up for Q&A. So I'll pass on to Jimmy for an intro.
Thanks, Leon. Hi, everyone. So yes, I'm Jimmy Mortimer, research consultant at Vanson Bourne, where I've worked for around 10 years now. And just to give you a quick overview about Vanson Bourne, we are an independent technology B2B market research specialist that has been in operation for a little over 20 years now. And just to give you an idea of the kind of work we do, in the last 12 months, we've surveyed more than 150,000 respondents. And by far the majority of those will be business decision makers of one kind or another.
Thank you, Jimmy. So my name is Leon. I'm Elsewhen founder and Chief Product and Strategy Officer. Historically, I'm a software engineer moving into product. So I have got a product technology shape. Today, I work with our clients in the corporate sector to help them structure the way they're going to work with us. Just going to tell you a little bit about Elsewhen, the consultancy that I'm part of that commissioned this research. Elsewhen is a digital product consultancy. We help leaders harness a cutting-edge approach to design and technology to deliver positive impact for their organizations. Elsewhen has been around since 2011. We have way over 100 client engagements. We're a 60-plus team of very senior, so everyone is a lead senior level consultant between 10 to 20 years of experience. We are independent, so we're an independent consultancy, a relatively different thing today on the market. Just to give you an idea, Elsewhen, are the people that work at Elsewhen. That's basically it. We hire people that have exceptional craftability around strategy, design, technology, and they're also love collaborating. We believe that hiring the very best allows us to move 300, 400% faster, not just 10, 20% faster. Just to give you an idea, we hire about 1% of applicants into Elsewhen. We are a remote first company, but we continue to invest heavily into social and spending time together to kind of keep the culture up. We hire approximately 2 hours outside London time zone. The majority of the talent is based in London. We're not a nearshore, offshore kind of offering. We have been very lucky working with some amazing clients. Our history is big tech, so Google, we work with Spotify. However, today, we really focus on more traditional sectors that try to digitalize and become a lot more tech-enabled. So we work in financial services, insurance, construction, retail, and really great. Been very lucky with some of the partners we had over the years. Just a quick idea to give you some context of how we work with clients, because that really shaped the way we built this survey with Jimmy's team. So we help partners in 3 ways. Around digital strategy, project teams, and digital transformation. We really work end-to-end through the product lifecycle. On digital strategy, we work with partners towards an action-oriented business case that puts digital in the center. So we come in and we help them define their strategies for innovation or transformation, and we work across strategy, design, and technology in one kind of cohesive work stream. We provide teams, kind of a team as a service, that remove every barrier for moving fast and delivering at the highest of outputs. So we co-create with clients, we work independently. It's not a nearshore, offshore offering. It's a very senior team you would entrust something important to. We do a lot of work in digital transformation, where we help transformation programs deliver consumer-grade customer experience, to really focus on enterprise and B2B. It's mostly the space we work in. And we passionately believe that software in that space can be as delightful as consumer software. So that's it in terms of giving you a bit of background about us and a bit of a plug. And let's jump into talking about, why did we carry out this research? Why did we find it interesting to commission something like that?
Right. So when Elsewhen approached us, they explained that they'd not only seen a variety of approaches when it came to digital projects, but varying levels of success to these as well. So to explore this, Elsewhen wanted primarily to see the extent to which and how UK organisations are strategizing and planning their digital projects. And that can include exploring how advanced and complete the digital strategies are, as well as also including the challenges being experienced and the success or potentially lack of success of the digital projects that are being run. But first, I'll just run through a quick few slides to build a picture of the respondents that we interviewed. So we interviewed 200 senior decision makers in the UK. And by senior decision makers, I mean C-level director, senior managers and equivalents of those in functions that are key to Elsewhen and key as well, of course, to making technology decisions for their organizations. So just to run a few of those details. So those key functions included customer experience, IT, of course, product development, data and digital, engineering, and design and research and development.
As Jimmy said, the scene, we really looked at folks that we normally work with, and we wanted to sample that at scale and not just kind of have anecdotal evidence from day-to-day work. So these are the typical stakeholders that we have on projects.
And as you can see, we covered quite a wide number of key sectors in order to get a good representative spread of the industries that Elsewhen work with on a day-to-day basis. As
I introduced earlier, we have a relatively broad sector experience. So we wanted to demonstrate that in the survey as well.
And so all organizations, as you can see here, had at least 1,000 employees. And in fact, as you can see from the chart, the majority had at least 5,000 employees. So we were interviewing respondents very much from enterprise size organizations.
We had to focus, and we started with looking at what our typical client size. These are the size of our typical clients. We had to focus. We didn't really look outside of that. We concentrated on the type of companies we would normally work with. Okay, great. So we're going to start off with a few slides around the broad status of organizations when it comes to their digital strategy and digital plans. So generally speaking, we found that respondents are very likely to regard their organization's digital strategy as being advanced. So the first chart here shows that shows the different stages that respondents said that their organization is at when it comes to defining their digital strategy. So start off with, so almost half, so that's the 46% black segment, see their organization as being in a good place with a fully defined, implemented and optimized digital strategy that runs across the business. And in contrast, only around 1 in 5, so 23%, so that's the 9% and the 14% you see there, saying that there's either no strategy or if there is a strategy, that there's no direct action as a result of that strategy. This is very interesting because I wonder what would happen if we did this 3 years ago prior to COVID. I think what we noticed as well is kind of anecdotally in the market is that there's almost no company today that doesn't have some kind of a digital strategy, which was, I think, quite different prior to COVID. And it became the top agenda instead of organizations saying that it's the top agenda or kind of pretending it's the top agenda. It actually is now, and that is very evident throughout this service. So this is quite exciting for us. So what are the overall goals of the digital projects that organizations are running? So we found that the needs of customers and employees
are the most likely to be the key drivers when it comes to the goals of digital projects. So here we can see, firstly, what digital projects have been run in the last 12 months. So that's the dark colored bars, and also what's planned for the 12 months ahead, and that's the lighter color. So each digital project type has its own pair of bars, essentially. As you can see, most of the paired bars are fairly similar in terms of percentage, so that indicates that generally speaking, organizations are generally likely to be continuing their work. But probably what's most interesting is that improving employee and or customer experience are quite comfortably most likely to be the focused for most organizations, as you can see that they're quite clearly the top two most highly selected answers in that chart.
Like I said, we don't have data prior to COVID. I wish we had. We just started doing this. So it is amazing to see that experience, which something we believe in, is at the very top. And there's also quite a lot of focus, not just on customer experience, but also employee experience. And we think that this is part of the trends that are emerging post-COVID of businesses digitalizing the way that their employees, the customers, are interfacing with them. So, it's sometimes hard to convince, but that this is the most important thing. But here it is in plain sight. It is very important for a lot of different organizations.
And before we go into a bit more detail regarding those digital projects, it's just worth emphasizing that obviously a digital strategy isn't just an abstract concept. It needs to work with and for its employees. So starting at the column on the left of the screen, that 57% is the proportion who say that they are extremely proud of their organization's approach to digital projects. What we've then done is taken that stat and split it by the various different answers we saw a few slides ago, where we saw respondents say how advanced their digital strategies are, if at all. So based on that, now you can see from the column on the right that respondents are far more likely to say that they're extremely proud if their digital strategy is defined, implemented, and optimized. So in other words, if it was the most advanced stage that the digital strategy could be, they're much more likely to say that they're proud of that digital strategy, which of course makes sense. So what this means then is that an advanced digital strategy can provide morale benefits for employees as well. So now let's see what's included in those digital strategies. So now when we start to dig a little bit more into the data, we've got a bit more of a mixed picture perhaps starting to emerge. So when examining the elements that make up organizations' digital strategy, many have work to do. So firstly, nearly 2/3, so that's 64% of organizations, include a digital operating model in their strategy. And similarly, just over half, 52%, say that their strategy includes a digital vision. However, more than a fifth, that was 21% of organizations, have neither of these. So they've neither got a digital vision, nor have they got a digital operating model. So that shows that a significant proportion of organizations may have a digital strategy that doesn't actually incorporate all of the elements that ideally it should. And on a similar point then, as you run your eye further down that list, perhaps some of those numbers maybe seem a little bit lower than they should be, than you might expect them to have been. So we did find then that that there are some notable gaps when it comes to digital strategies in respondents' organizations.
So one of the things that we work very closely on is creating for our clients strategies that can be implemented. So we took here a basket of key stones that should be in your strategic plan, and we surveyed against that, and we found out that it's a very mixed picture. So looking at this, we're kind of wondering what do these strategies actually include that being, the respondents answered on? And I think this is a little bit of a thread that is going to open up throughout the survey, because in our opinion, these are very important things that you should be deciding on in your strategic plan, and they're not there. So yeah, let's unpack this a little bit further.
Great. So is there more evidence for gaps in digital strategies? So we also asked respondents what services third parties supported their organization with on digital projects. And this gives us a further guide on what gaps these organizations have when it comes to digital projects, whether it's skills gaps, resource gaps, tech gaps, and so forth. What we see is that these gaps cross many areas. Digital product design, 48%, product strategy, 43%, software engineering, 36%, solution integration, 35% being the four most likely. So while the exact elements and extent of support will vary depending upon the requirements of the project and the organization, there is a clear need for a mix of strategic, such as product strategy, and technical support and skills, such as software engineering, to be provided by third parties.
There's an element of market research here. We are a digital product consultancy, so it was very interesting for us to see at scale where the different gaps across different industries, and the top two are digital product design and product strategy, and then software engineering, which is also covered by us. So it's really interesting and reassuring to see that, and we see that in the market. This is what a lot of organizations need help with.
So are the outcomes of digital projects as successful as they could be? So what we found is that clearly there is room for improvement. We asked respondents the extent to which the outcomes of any of their recent digital projects could have been improved upon. So working from left to right, here's just a sample. So 89% of respondents whose organization was working on improving employee or customer experience said that project could have had their outcome improved upon. Similarly, 88% of digital projects focused on removing internal productivity blockers, again, could have had their outcome improved upon. And 84% of digital projects focused on unlocking hidden value or making better use of the organization's data could have had their outcome improved upon. So to recap, we've gone from this situation where most organizations have a reasonably advanced digital strategy, or at least are claiming to have a reasonably advanced digital strategy, but then to seeing that actually organizations need quite a bit of support across a variety of areas, from what we just saw with the support that third parties are providing. And yet still, they're not necessarily seeing the ideal outcomes that they want to see in the majority of cases, most of the time.
I think this is very interesting because it goes back to that first slide of how many companies are doing something and they have a strategy that is doing something. And there's still quite a big gap between that and what they achieved in the end. So things can be improved. I think that's great, because if you started doing something, it's never going to be easy the first time around, and as you're doing it, you see you can do it better. It's a very encouraging slide in general in seeing in the market of companies working on things and thinking they can do that better. It's a very optimistic and a great slide to see. We believe in you get the best ROI, the better experience you deliver, the better tools you create, the better ROI you're going to get. The best product wins. So it's really exciting to see that folks that are working in digital and on digital are introspectively want to push things further.
So why are organizations experiencing these problems? So we asked respondents about the challenges that their organizations were experiencing in digital projects. And there are a few things to note here on this chart. So first, actually just go straight to the bottom and look at the stat right at the bottom. That 4% who said that they never experienced any challenges. So to flip that stat on its head, effectively that's saying 96% of respondents were saying that they have experienced at least one challenge. Then to move back to the top of the chart, it's worth noting that this top stat is only 32%. So what that sort of implies is that there is quite a variety of challenges being experienced by organizations. So there's no dominant one or two challenges that if you go to an organization, it's likely they'll be facing. You go to one organization, there are any given 2 or 3 challenges, but then another organization will have a different set of challenges entirely. That being said, if there is one clear theme that comes out of this, it's potentially it's leadership. You've got 2 of the top 3 answers highlighted there, reporting leadership issues. And indeed, that theme comes out a little elsewhere in the survey as well. So moving on to a couple of stats collected at other questions. So 55% of respondents said that their organization's senior leadership team is extremely digitally literate. That's great. And yet 60% also say that their senior leadership team doesn't understand how to use emerging tech, such as AI and ML, to benefit their business. So we can see potentially a little bit of contradiction when it comes to leadership. Maybe leadership does have some skills and experience in this area, but it's not necessarily always of the right kind.
This is very interesting because, yeah, every organization, as we've seen in the previous slide, every organization you go to experiences something a little bit different, but also there are some commonalities. And this area of leadership is something that we see quite a lot. The type of support that sometimes is required from the very top to make the right decisions, to help the teams underneath deliver, there's sometimes gaps in knowledge around digital and technology that make things a little bit more difficult. And to me, that is a huge opportunity for organizations to embed technology and digital much more deeply into their fabric, and that has to be represented in the leadership. It shouldn't be like a separated IT or digital department. It really needs to be transformed organization, become a part of it. So that is something that really spoke to me because I've seen this over and over again, that top support being a little bit less engaging and sophisticated as it should be.
So to go briefly back to the challenges experienced we saw a couple of slides ago, how do these challenges look from the perspective of individual sectors? So what we see here illustrates the point well that challenges will vary from organization to organization. So what we're seeing here is the most often experienced challenge by a few of the key sectors that we interviewed. So just to read from left to right. So 44% of respondents from financial services said that they've encountered a lack of commitment from the organization to the required changes. 30% in FMCG said that they've encountered no clear ownership. 38% in retail said they encountered a lack of leadership with technology experience. 42% in distribution and transport said that they've encountered a lack of leadership with product experience. And for all of the other sectors combined, 32% said that they've encountered a lack of leadership with product experience. So just to re-emphasize, these were the most highly reported challenges in each of those sectors or collections of sectors. So, but ultimately, what do these challenges mean for organizations, and how widespread are the problems? So combining the data from a few questions, clearly we can see overall that there are issues. So again, reading from left to right, 85% said that they need guidance on measuring how well digital projects are going and in what else could be possible in those projects. 62% said that there's a lack of implementation experience when working on digital strategy. 64% said that there are big gaps between strategy and what can actually be shown. 39% said that they don't have a clear digital strategy. And 50% said that digital transformation is not a top priority for their organization.
This, for me, is one of the most interesting slides in this presentation, because you can really see how this connects to one of the first slides we shared, which is the kind of what is included in your digital strategy. And here in stats 2 and 3, you can immediately see the impact emerging, the gaps between strategy and implementation, and the lack of experience in implementation when designing strategy. This really jumped out at me. And I think when you work in technology, innovation, transformation, you actually need to deliver on what you're setting, and articulating the steps to be able to do that is very, very important. You can't just set a vision, a blue sky vision, and decide that it's going to happen. No, PowerPoint Venn diagram is going to help you to do that. And I think this is this really talked to me. Also, I find the kind of the metrics and the guidance piece, the very first stat, very interesting, because we see this over and over in our clients. And like I said, our history is coming from big tech, and in very strong digitally native technology organizations, you can see very clear metrics across everything. So you could connect a change in a product iteration directly to a CEO KPI. And I think this is something that in more traditional organizations that are becoming digital is often missing, and creates a lot of miscommunication and misdirection. And I would connect that again to the leadership piece, being able to define and send down KPIs that are connected to digital and technology, and understand how they impact each other. Around changes in CX directly into the bottom line is super important, and a lot of times lacking. So I really love this slide.
So most of those 5 stats that we just saw are quite high, as you saw. But to quickly recap, so we saw at the start of the deck that 46% of respondents said that their organization's digital strategy is defined, implemented, and optimized across the business. So what we will see on the next few slides are those same 5 stats that we just saw, but split just by this 46% of respondents who said that their organization's digital strategy is advanced. So what we'll see is that while the numbers are lower, which is broadly what you would expect and hope to see, I would say that they are mostly still relatively high for the most part. So what this will demonstrate is that even in organizations that think they're doing well when it comes to digital strategy, there is no guarantee of success. And so they still need help when it comes to the actual implementation. So 91% agreed that their organization needs guidance in measuring how well their digital transformation projects are going and what else could be possible. 54% agree that there is a lack of implementation experience when working on digital strategy. 56% agree that there are big gaps between strategy and what can actually be achieved. 29% say that they don't have a clear digital strategy. And finally, 27% agree that digital transformation is not the top priority for their organization. So just to re-emphasize, again, these are the views, what we just saw are the views of respondents who claim that their organizations have an advanced digital strategy. And while some of these numbers are notably lower, I mean, for example, this one is 27% compared to 50% overall, nonetheless, still a significant proportion are still having problems.
This is super interesting again, and really connects back to that strategic slide, the missing parts. It seems that some of these strategies that have been defined are clearly significantly missing the mark, and some of this positive sentiment that we receive back, once we actually start to uncover it a little bit and dig deeper, the data seems to tell a different story. So this was a very interesting insight.
So what are the real world implications of these challenges and disappointing digital projects? So what we found is that critically, these challenges, these digital projects with less than ideal outcomes, are having real visible impacts on the business, according to our respondents. So to look at the chart that shows the impacts, again, there's no single answer that dominates, but you've got somewhere between a third and 4 in 10, or around 4 in 10, reporting a few different elements. We've highlighted a few, but we don't need to dwell on the details of all of them. Clearly, this shows that digital projects are not nice to have. There can be real world outcomes and impacts. And so there are big implications as well if they don't go to plan. So just to run down a few of them. So 42% said that their revenue and growth was lower than forecast. Almost the same number, 41% said that compliance requirements not fulfilled. 36% new product launch delayed. IT security risks, strategic objectives not met, organizational clashes experienced by a third or more. These are all quite serious things that you would want to avoid happening in your organization.
We can see real impact. So I think that that sort of lack of clarity ends up impacting the business. That's the gist of it. If investing in technology, investing in transformation, investing in digital is expensive. It is more and more connected to the core business, and the impacts are very real and very painful, and sometimes disastrous. And this is the slide that says, let's take these things very seriously and let's invest in them. Interesting to see the breakdown, the breakdown across the different areas of impact as well.
Great. So let's finish with a summary. So to run through a few final thoughts, organizations usually have a direction when it comes to their digital approach. There is almost always a level of strategy, albeit not always fully optimized across the business, and a range of projects in progress and planned. Many organizations find that their digital projects encounter challenges that limit success, and even, as we just saw, cause negative impacts. There is a disconnect between the strategy and the implementation of the strategy, is what we've seen. Leadership-related issues and limited availability of key skills can constrain the digital strategy. So leadership and departments can or must work together to understand and overcome their weaknesses. Third-party digital consultancies can also play an important role in this to plug gaps, as we saw. So in order to deliver digital transformation successfully, organizations need to be honest with themselves when it comes to their capability to plan and run a digital project end to end. If they cannot identify their limitations and take action to strengthen these areas, then they do risk falling behind their competitors. So thanks for listening to that run through of the key data and the highlights of the research. We do have a little bit of time, quite a bit of time, to answer any questions that you have already. And just to reassure you, of course, your questions are anonymous. So please do ask questions if you have one. Let's see if we've got anything. So there's a lack of so in my experience, there's a lack. So we've got several questions actually. In my experience, there's a lack of understanding generally on the difference between digital transformation and business transformation and what their strategies reflect. And yeah, absolutely, we certainly find that across our research, and not just within this research, but beyond this research. So many ignore or do not approach the latter. How does that relate to your findings? So, I mean, I suppose I don't know about ignore or not approaching the latter. I mean, I don't know whether Leon can give us some more details on that, but we certainly do see, I think the data does reflect the fact that there can be somewhat of a clash between sort of what IT's view is, what the digital view is, and what the kind of the broader view of business is. I mean, we saw earlier when it comes to the challenges being experienced. So I think we saw 20% talk about organizational silos, for example. That's exactly the kind of situation that you don't want to have if you want your digital strategy to align with your business strategy. Potentially also that element of leadership might fall into that as well. So I mean, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I mean, I think the data definitely shows that there needs to be, the business does need to work together to make sure that not only are digital targets met, but wider business targets are met as well.
I think whoever asked the question is made a very good point. Very precise for what we're seeing in this survey, and what we see a lot in the field working with organizations is that lack of change in process, or change in approach to doing strategy for digital versus business strategy, and bringing, and technology has a lot of complications associated with its delivery. It's kind of like the most complex thing that humans do. It's the most complex thing humans build. Sorry, is technology. So taking that into account is a lot of times missing. There's software industry has existed for a very long time, relatively, and it developed certain tools to manage risk and change and approach things. And a lot of times these are not reflected in the process. It's very business heavy in approach, and then kind of like, don't worry about it, somebody's gonna build it, it's okay. And that's just does not work over and over and over again. Also, what we find a lot of times, there's a huge focus on process or technical execution. So what platforms we're going to use, or what vendors, so kind of like selecting the right partners, and then what are the different processes we need to change, versus really looking at things through the customer lens. And that is could be your customer that you deliver value to, but also we treat internal employees as customers, and we bring product thinking and customer thinking to solving their problems, to create tools that are that are delightful to use and increase productivity. And to do these sort of things, to execute at a level that you would see in the organizations that you're trying to compete with, or that you see coming to compete with you, you need to use tools and frameworks that exist, that help make software execution easier, and not just thinking about the business problems. So I think this is very, it's also quite clearly seen in this survey.
Great, thanks, Leon. So on to the next question. So people feeling their strategy is advanced is subjective. How do they measure that beyond purely what is in their digital strategy? I mean, that's a fair question, and completely fair point. A lot of the research, it is subjective based on the respondents' views. I suppose it's worth noting this question was submitted fairly early on, so I think it's fair to say we sort of explained that in the second half of the deck, where we were talking about the fact that, look, 46% were saying that their strategy is advanced, or even more than 46% if you include some of the answers. But actually, here's the reality, that they're having problems. I think a lot of people will. What we want people from research is to give their gut reaction. We don't want to necessarily channel them down too narrow a path, because then at that point you start getting into quite technical definitions, technical details, and you sort of open up a bit of a can of worms for yourself. So I think it's important to take the gut reaction, the gut answer from the respondent at face value. They feel it's advanced. They're happy with it. It was the top answer that gave that 46%. So it's not like we're combining answers. That was 46% who said this. On this scale, we couldn't really be better. And yet, then you see such a large number of them are still having issues. You know, and I think that's the key takeaway from that point.
Yeah, the first initial response to that question really surprised us. So we're going, oh, this is a very optimistic outlook, and I think maybe it's just human, just like human behavior, typical human behavior, kind of like, yeah, how are you doing? I'm doing good. That sort of thing. So it was great to be able to dig and see a little bit further. Like, we're not the only data point for this. It's fairly acceptable that more than 50% of digital transformations projects fail. This is not like a unique thing that is emerging from our research.
And so the next question. So yeah, lack of funding is a big issue in the public sector, notwithstanding a COVID flurry. It would be interesting to see if and how this impacts other sectors. So yeah, so this, I think this refers to, this refers to the challenges experienced when running digital projects. So lack of funding was at 18%. Yeah, so lack of funding was reported by 18% of respondents. So I can see if I can quickly summon up the other stats for the other sectors for this answer, but I suppose it's worth actually pointing out while I look for this, that actually there's two things that often come up in our research as kind of generic answers. One is security, as in, oh, they're worried about security, that kind of thing. And the other thing is lack of funding. Now, it was interesting to see in this question asking about challenges, actually how low, relatively speaking, funding came. I made the point, of course, is that the percentages were fairly tight. 32% was the top answer, of course, and funding's not too far behind on 18%. It's still more than half of that number. But the fact that it comes so low down the list, it's third from the bottom, kind of does illustrate that it seems like lack of funding, at the moment at least, is relatively speaking not a problem, which in itself is maybe, in itself, that's I would say that's a little bit of a surprising finding, and it does kind of serve to emphasize the fact that this issue of leadership is potentially more of a more of an issue than we might first suspect. So yeah, I found the stats. So overall, lack of funding 18%. For finance, it was 13%. FMCG 10%. Retail 18%. Distribution and transport 15%, and then for all the other sectors combined, it was 27%. So it's very much an issue in that group of other sectors. So it's not because that number for each sector is so low, we had to group them together. So it's not really possible to tease out. But yeah, it's interesting to see that the key sectors that we focused on, generally speaking, funding was broadly on average less likely to be a problem, and that's reflected in the overall results as well.
Just pick up on that. I think, first of all, I think the question was within the public sector, and I think Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't really focus on the public sector that much, mostly on the private sector.
Yeah.
And the reason is, as I introduced the survey, we focused on where we are active at the moment as a consultancy. We're actually applying for kind of G Cloud and all that stuff. We really see a huge opportunity to help the public sector, but we're not there yet. So I have to say that we excluded that at the moment at the level that maybe whoever asked that question is interested in. However, I want to make a comment a little bit about kind of industries that are not doing that well, who have budget constraints, because I had a conversation about that yesterday with the CIO in the gym industry, and obviously they had a huge impact by COVID and etc. And I would say my answer to this is that if we look at at what we're surveying here and what we're seeing in outside working with clients, is that even when the budgets are reduced or much lower, we a lot of times see them being spent at not the right things in terms of where that money could make a lot of impact in terms of pushing digitalization and transformation further, and and customer centricity, and creating really successful tools. And I think you can look at industries that have huge amount of legacy and have to spend money on that. So how can you deal with that and move forward? Industries that had their budgets cut down, they have very small budgets. And I kind of I just want to throw it out there, but in the public sector, some outlandish amounts of money being spent to deliver digital outcomes extremely poorly. When you could talk about the COVID app, you could talk about some of the local authority infrastructure and sites that I personally use, and I actually know how much being spent on. So there's I think a better way sometimes to spend budgets, even when they're limited. And I would directly connect it again to that digital strategy piece of understanding how you get to what you want to get to much better. It would help distribute the budgets to the right things. And also the metrics piece, measuring things correctly, would help funnel the budgets to where they're needed. That would be my answer with kind of tackling low budget areas.
Thanks for that. And so next question. So digital literacy is a broad term. So this is referring to where we said we asked respondents how digitally literate their organization's senior leadership team is. Would love to know how this is defined. For example, using a smartphone is only a small quadrant. So yes, fair point. So basically we defined different levels of digital literacy. Again, we don't want to go into too much depth, but I mean, as this question has pointed out, you don't want respondents confusing it with sort of simple consumer kind of grade digital literacy. So the top answer for which was the 55%, said so extremely digitally literate, and then there was a clarification. They come from digital backgrounds and understand it thoroughly. So I think in the context, and this question was around halfway through the survey, so that kind of clarification after the word extremely, in the context of what we've been discussing, should be enough to at least make the respondents understand that we're after leaders. We're talking about whether leaders really understand, or whether you think your leaders really understand the backgrounds behind technical decision, really understand why certain technical decisions are being made. As ever, there is room for the interpretation of the respondent, but yeah, so we have to give that freedom, as otherwise people start otherwise questions start becoming a bit too kind of in the weeds, essentially. And then the next question, I think, Leon, the next question might be more for you. So not all digital strategies for organizations are the same. Yeah, absolutely. What would you recommend as first steps to optimizing digital strategies?
I think there are, we have an opinion on how this sort of process should run, what you should include and what you should not include, how you should plan ahead for something that is so unknown and so high risk as delivering and implementing something technical. It's kind of a little bit outside the scope of this, but I would say that would use this as plug-in. We have a white paper on kind of 8 weeks, our definition process, where we outline steps and one by one. We also recently ran a webinar where we go through how we do this sort of definition to create kind of an action-oriented plan that can be executed. And maybe after we can follow up with the respondent who just sent out some links to have a look. I think that could be a really worthwhile thing to share. And I just want to touch the optimization piece. I think that everybody should have a plan, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy. I think this is something that is extremely important, and a lot of times, again, not really baked into the process and into the journey that stakeholders are taken on when strategies are being built, and what they're being promised, and how it's going to be delivered, and how the implementation process is going to look like. And again, I would connect that to the difference between business transformation and digital transformation. And I think strategy should be constantly optimized. Nothing that is defined ahead is not going to change once you actually start building, start implementing. And what we see again with a lot of change efforts, where the implementation is really discarded. It's all about the vision and setting that vision, not really how you're going to get to it. Change should be constant. You should be able to respond to the complexities that you see, to the responses that you get from your customers, to the responses that you get from the people testing and using the software. Everything should be constantly changing. So optimization is a cornerstone of a digital transformation process. And when it's not, things fail. That's my opinion. When seeing a lot of this stuff happening. So yeah, that would be my kind of word of advice. And again, we have a process that I think is a great, repeatable process, and I'm very happy to share that.
Great, thank you. And I think we've got time for perhaps one more question. So it feels like digital projects of the companies that that you interview were going more badly than we have experienced. Did you ask anything about the advantages they gained from their projects? So yeah, it's a fair point. So we did get some positive data around digital projects. So around let me see. So around 4 in 10 respondents said that they saw an improvement in employee operations and customer satisfaction. Is one example. So yeah, I suppose at this point, yeah, it's worth emphasizing that we're definitely not saying that all digital projects are going completely wrong everywhere. And there are still plenty of positives, plenty of benefits that organizations are experiencing. I suppose just to re-emphasize, the fact is that what we saw is that pretty much all organizations are having quite significant issues with their digital projects in a fair few areas. And I suppose and the issue is the risk that of the potential real noticeable impact that this can place on the business, alongside all of the benefits that they're seeing elsewhere, of course. And let's see. So actually, no, sorry. Yeah. So if you've got any questions, do submit them. We do just have one final question. So it feels like digital projects of the companies you interviewed were going more badly. Oh, sorry, I'm just reading that one again. Sorry. You said that third parties are supporting businesses with digital transformation, but do you know how often this is happening? So yeah, I think we did say, I can't remember exactly whether we said this, but in fact, all respondents in our survey did say that their organization is using a third party at least occasionally. So there were no respondents who said they never use a third party consultancy to help with their digital transformation. But we also saw that this does vary from organization to organization. So broadly speaking, it was around half of organizations were using third parties in the majority of their projects, and around half were using third parties in the minority of projects. So it was a fairly equal split between regular and occasional users, essentially. And I think that's it from all the questions. So thanks again. Thanks very much for listening.